This is your Wednesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Hope you guys are having a good one out there. Plenty to get to today. Wolves played, playoff game, lost. Wild played, got a win over Montreal, a good one for them to secure 2 more points in their quest to get home ice in the postseason. Twins played and lost. We'll get to all of those things in a little bit. Got to talk about the Twins bullpen. Talk about the Wild Cam Talbot, how well he's been playing, and Kevin Fiala, how well he's been playing. And we got to talk to Marcus Fuller here in a little bit. Gophers men's basketball beat writer for the Star Tribune. Big get for the Gophers earlier this week when they got Dawson Garcia, transfer from North Carolina, originally from Prior Lake. Marcus will help break down kind of what that means, how significant that was, and maybe also what is yet to come for this team as they continue to work the transfer portal, and Ben Johnson tries to fill out this roster with high-caliber players in hopes of having a more successful year 2 of his program. But first, what did I miss? Got to talk Wolves at the Jump. Lost 124-96 against Memphis in Game 2 of that playoff series on Tuesday night. A game that was predictable in a lot of ways and unwatchable in multiple ways as well. Let's get to the predictability first. Now, Wolves fans had kind of dreamed up a scenario where the Wolves took a 2-0 series lead with 2 straight road victories, then came back to Target Center in control of the series. That's not typically how these things go, even when a road team steals Game 1. I'm not even going to say the Wolves stole Game 1 because they were the better team in Game 1. They came in and earned a Game 1 win. But when that happens, the home team, the higher seed, has a level of desperation that is hard for the road underdog to match. And I think you saw that to a certain degree on Tuesday night. That Memphis was just They knew this series, while it wouldn't quite be over if they went down 2-0 with 2 home losses, it would put them in a serious, tough spot after losing Game 1. So they came out with a lot more energy, a lot more purpose, and played a lot more like the team they have been for much of the season. Got more from players not named Ja Morant in this game. Jaren Jackson Jr. was a plus 21, had 16 points, 7 rebounds. Desmond Bain, 16 points, pretty efficient, just 10 shots. Got a lot of contributions from the bench. 4 different bench players in double figures. Thought a key moment in the game was Steven Adams picking up his second foul. Just 3 minutes into the game, he did not get back on the court. He's been a liability in this series so far. He was a -1 when he went out. The Grizzlies ended up being a plus 29 without him. So watch that as the series goes forward. How much will Steven Adams actually play in this series versus, how much will Memphis go with a more versatile, switch-heavy lineup to defend Karl-Anthony Towns, to defend some of the Wolves' other players? Because let's face it, Towns did not have a good game. He was in foul trouble. That was another element of the predictability to this game. When Towns gets in foul trouble, he struggles. He had, he picked up a couple quick ones. He had 3 pretty fast, 15 points, 11 rebounds. He shot the ball fine, but he only got 7 shots, only played 28 minutes, was a -21 for the game. So if we're talking about predictability, we're talking about Memphis playing better when they're desperate, hitting the offensive glass. They had 14 rebounds. They were 14 offensive rebounds. They were an excellent offensive rebounding team during the season, and the Wolves were not a very good defensive rebounding team during the season. Now we're talking about Cat getting in foul trouble and the team suffering as a result. That game against the Clippers was really an anomaly where they were able to overcome that, and they don't want to live that way. So that is the scenario coming back to Minneapolis on Thursday night. Wolves 1-1. They got to feel fine with that. They know they missed an opportunity, but still, this is now essentially a best-of-5 series where the Wolves just need to win all 3 of their home games or 3 games at any point, and they will win this series. So they have to know that is still, if you were going into this 2 games in Memphis with a realistic goal, it was a split. They already had that in hand going into Game 2. Maybe a little disappointing that they couldn't make this closer, that they couldn't put forth a better effort to make this a more realistic possibility. But hey, sometimes that is life. Speaking of which, the game was unwatchable in multiple ways as well. So many fouls early on. There was no flow to the game. I don't know what the directive is from the league office, or if it's just the referees calling it how they want to call it, but I wish they would just let him play a little bit more, because that was just, it took a good quarter and a half before this game had any kind of rhythm, and by that point, I was kind of bored with it, to be honest. It just was not a very aesthetically pleasing game. The other element of unwatchable, a lot of people finding it hard to watch the game because they couldn't get it. People who were YouTube TV subscribers, the game was blacked out on NBA TV and, of course, YouTube TV, as well as so many other streaming devices and some other satellite carriers do not have Bally Sports North right now. So a lot of people complaining on Twitter that they were not able to watch the game. Maybe not the worst thing in retrospect, because it was not a very good game to watch. But again, the frustration with the TV situation in this team continues to rear its ugly head. Now, the good news is that should not be a problem for games 3 and 4. The TV already announced for those two. TNT, in addition to Bally Sports North, will have Game 3. ESPN, in addition to Bally Sports North, will have Game 4. And Game 3 Thursday, a nice 6:30 p.m. start, as opposed to the 9 o'clock Saturday start. So get ready for that. You should be able to watch Games 3 and Game 4 regardless of whether you are shut out from Bally Sports North or not, as long as you have ESPN and or TNT. So pay attention to that, and we'll see if the Wolves become more watchable in more ways than one.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is playday.
Happy to have Marcus Fuller back on Daily Delivery. Covers the Gophers men's basketball team for the Star Tribune and does a great job of it. Had a interesting last 24, 48 hours as the Gophers were pursuing Dawson Garcia, the former Prior Lake standout. Started his college career at Marquette, then went to North Carolina, then entered the portal once more, and Ben Johnson finding out on Monday that he has in fact committed to the Gophers. Marcus, can you frame up for our listeners just how big of a deal Dawson Garcia is for Ben Johnson and his program?
It really is something that we've seen coming for a while now, since he entered the portal. I want to say for a week it started to head in that direction, but until you see it, you don't believe it. And obviously he announced his commitment on Monday, and it was official. He hasn't signed yet, but it's only a matter of time. And Gopher fans went ecstatic. Even some media members who I won't mention were sending me some pretty excited emojis. And, I think that when you look at what happened under Richard Pitino, especially toward the end of his tenure, where they were losing, if not most, all of the top talent in the state, to get one of those guys that left the state to come back in Ben Johnson's second off season and really first full recruiting class, that says a lot. It's a huge statement. Do we expect Dawson Garcia to be, a huge impact immediately if he's eligible? Certainly. Is he the cornerstone of winning a Big Ten title? Obviously, fans hope so. But I think he will tell you as well that he's just a piece of this rebuilding process, and they're continuing to add to that.
Now, just McDonald's All-American, their first one since Chris Humphreys, if I'm not mistaken. I think you've written that. Coming out of high school, he was very highly touted. Wound up at Marquette. His journey has been a little bit of a difficult one. Left North Carolina mid-season last year. Had a lot of family members who were suffering from the effects of COVID. Wanted to be closer to home. What else about him, background-wise, should we know?
That's the one thing about Minnesota talent is everyone knows quite a bit about them. When they're in high school, He's 6'11". When he first, kind of made a name for himself outside of the state of Minnesota, he wasn't recruited that heavily by the Gophers. Marquette was obviously a team, and Steve Wojciechowski that recruited him early in the process, and they kind of zeroed in on him. He was in a 2020 class that they had a lot of post players that the Gophers had offered. Ben Carlson from Wisconsin, Dane Danger from Park Center, Stephen Crowell from Eastview. There were a lot of post players in that class. I want to say 5 of them that the Gophers offered. And, at the time, he wasn't at the top of the list. And then eventually he just shot up to the top. Not only did he have the size, but he could stretch the floor. He put some weight on, and he was really just one of the best players in the country at his position. Became a McDonald's All-American, like you said, first since 2004 that'll play for the Gophers. But at the time, he joined Jalen Suggs with 2 Minnesotans in the McDonald's All-American game. It was the second time they had done that since back when Tyus Jones, Rashad Vaughn, and Reed Travis were in the McDonald's game together. So I think, the Gophers having a talent like this in the program, it says a lot. When he was at Marquette, he led all Big East freshmen in scoring and rebounding. His first year was all Big East freshman team. Wojciechowski was fired after that season with a losing record and was the main reason why he left, and ended up going to North Carolina, a team that offered him out of high school, and joined with his AAU teammate from D1 Minnesota, Kerwin Walton. I think that North Carolina, the situation there was so difficult for him after he left. Not only to see the team, pursue a national championship, that was the least of it. He lost some family members, and, going through that whole process, not being able to play basketball. I mean, he talked to me yesterday that it was the lowest point that he's been through yet. And, he's bounced out of that with his commitment Monday. It was a very happy time for him, but it was also emotional because, like I said, he lost some family members in the process. But Gopher fans can be excited about, what he brings to the table. And, he's not the only front court player they have next year. Last year, they were very low and in depth at that position. Now they have Jamison Battle and Pharrell Payne from Cottage Grove, Parker Fox, Trayton Thompson, and a number of others inside for Ben Johnson.
And they're going to need some backcourt help. I'll get to that here in a minute. Some folks they're still looking at recruiting-wise, portal-wise here in the coming week or two. But a couple things still on this big news with Dawson Garcia. First, he does need a waiver to play right away. In your estimation, based on his circumstances with his family, is that a formality or at least likely that he will be able to play next season?
I think the main reason why we're looking at this right is because of the one-time transfer rule. Guys who transferred multiple times in the past really had a hard time getting a waiver, even if it was a hardship waiver. But because they have the one-time transfer rule and COVID extra year of eligibility, really the NCAA is not stood in the way of a lot of players transferring multiple times and getting an extra year because of COVID during the pandemic. It just seems like a free-for-all when it comes to the portal. But in this case, I think it fits the classic hardship waiver. A lot of people say, hey, look at his playing time and his productivity before he left. But really, if you look deeper into the situation, he had been going through that with his family, and he also had a concussion in early January that hurt his play. If you look at the first 10 games Garcia played, he averaged over 12 points a game, 6 rebounds. He was shooting almost 48% from three-point range, almost 50% from the field. He had 26 versus Purdue, another couple 20-point games. So he was highly productive, and he was a starter for the first 12 games. The concussion really hurt his play before he ended up departing because of personal reasons. So this is a player that, when he's eligible, and I expect it to be, I think the Gophers do too, this summer, he's going to be a immediate impact player in the front court. In years past, those hardship waivers, even if a player had a situation that was clear for the NCAA to approve, they also required the former school to go along with it. And in this case, if you've seen the statements from Hubert Davis, Tar Heels coach, he really supports Dawson for being away from the team initially and invited him back, but then also once he was announced in the transfer portal, he understood the reasons for it and that he wanted to go closer to home. So I don't really see North Carolina standing in the way from his waiver.
That makes sense to me. One thing that I was curious about too that I wanted to ask you about is Ben Johnson is not super active on social media, but he likes to get in there and mix it up a little bit. What's the Denzel Washington thing with him? Because I've seen the Denzel Washington clip when something big is happening. What is that?
Well, it's training day, Mike. I mean, it's a training day meme. You've never seen that before? No, I'm kidding. I think obviously coaches nowadays on social media, when it comes to commitments, they like to use memes and different things to announce what's going on. They can't officially say the kid signed, right? So they come up with different things. I think PJ Fleck uses the spotlight. Am I not?
I think that's right. Yeah,
that?
I think that's right.
Yeah, he uses the spotlight. I think Pitino used the dancing gopher. Ben was here when Pitino started using that. And I think he's a training day fan, Denzel fan, and I believe it's as simple as that. He understands that a lot of coaches have done that, especially in this market. PJ Fleck has his, then Ben had to come up with his own. And I love it, man, because it kind of helps me, and when I see PJ spotlight go up, I'm like, uh-oh, my radar goes up, and it's about time to announce a commitment. And the same thing with Ben, even though a lot of times we see it coming, sometimes we don't. And I think it gets fans excited and it generates some interest on social media. The problem is everybody has access to that meme. So
right. If
they wanted to, they could just create a Ben Johnson account and start faking people out. But I haven't seen that yet.
At least, well, I like that. That is fun. And it did, that was the first clue. I mean, not the first clue Monday, because this was certainly something that you had been reporting on and we'd been following for a little while now. As soon as Garcia went into the portal, couple more things for you here, Marcus. One, you had a piece up Tuesday on now that they've got Dawson Garcia, now that they've got a lot of these other pieces in place in the front court. The strength of this team last season to a certain degree was was Jamison Battle, but also Peyton Willis and some of the other backcourt experienced players they had. A lot of those players gone. Who might they look to in recruiting in the portal now to help bolster this team? Because it looks like they've got a lot of options, or at least guys that are in for visits that could be on this team soon.
Yeah, I mean, last year they lost 10 guys to the portal, including Marcus Carr, Gabe Kalsher, Jamal Mashburn, their starting backcourt, Booth Gotch. So they had to replace their entire backcourt, really their entire team, but their starting backcourt in the portal, and they did that. They're at it again. Their only returning guard is Lay Theum, who was a freshman last year and barely played. So they really needed backcourt help more than they did front court help. And right now they just had Parker Stewart from Indiana visit over the weekend. Illinois State's Josiah Strong, who was a former Champlain Park standout, he visited on Monday when we got the Garcia news. And as we speak, there's a visit from Hunter McIntosh. He's from Elon. And later in the week, Talon Cooper from Morehead State will be visiting. And, a lot of these guys are mid-major players. Indiana's Parker Stewart was the only high-major visit so far from the guards. But again, last year you saw that, Peyton Willis coming from Charleston, although he was with the Gophers previously, Luke Lowy, William and Mary, and, Sean Sutherland and E.J. Stevens, they were all mid-major guards, but they came here And as a collective unit, they were highly productive. And Peyton Willis really set the standard for what point guards should be in the future under Ben Johnson. I've talked to him recently, and he's not looking for a guy to come in and play 40 minutes at that position, because he has, Braden Carrington for Park Center, Mr. Basketball coming in, and another guard from Jaden Henley from California. He's gonna want those guys to have experience and playing time as freshmen, but he does need experience at that position. And so, guys like McIntosh and Cooper this week, they played a lot of basketball. McIntosh has started 3 years in a row, and Cooper was, I believe, top 10 in the country in assists with almost 6 per game. So those guys, if they get either one of them or both, they'd immediately add a lot of experience to the position. But this is a team that I think, next season is going to lean heavily on the front court. It was the backcourt heavy, right, this year?
Yes.
With only really Eric Curry inside. And, I think it's going to be front court led. Jameson, in my opinion, is going to move over to the small forward spot, which I think is his ideal position for the next level. He's really working on his ball handling and defensive skills, to guard that position in the off season, and he's getting even better shape. And he's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country, and I think that's going to be a lethal combination with Battle, Garcia, and then you add in Pharrell Payne as a freshman, and Parker Fox and Isaiah Enon and some of the returning forwards that they have. So right now it's shaping up to be a much better, a more talented squad this year. But again, like you just mentioned, they're really going to need some backcourt help soon.
Yeah, and like you said, with the addition of Dawson Garcia, they now have, I believe, 7 Minnesotans on the roster for next season, which a departure from years past. I think you wrote, I think it was a few days ago about imagine a time when this could be a Minnesota-dominated roster. You feel like they're on the path to do that? It certainly seems like a priority for Ben Johnson.
It's starting to look like Wisconsin a little bit.
With all the Minnesota players?
With all the Minnesotan guys.
Right? I know, right?
I took a shot there. I'm sorry. Patino, he won't be listening to this, so it won't matter.
I'll send him the link. I'll make sure he listens and comes after you.
But I think at one time recently, Wisconsin had 7 Minnesotans on their team, and they won the Big Ten championship. So the Gophers are on their way to following in the Badgers' footsteps. But, it's one thing to have Minnesota players on your roster, scholarship players they have, and guys, they could go. I mean, right now, they will. Their Battle's not going to not start. You slide Battle over to 3, you could go with 3 starters from Minnesota, with Battle, Garcia and Pharrell Payne, or Battle, Fox, and Garcia. 3 guys, in the interior from Minnesota. The only Minnesota guard I believe they're recruiting right now as far as transfers is Josiah Strong from Illinois State, and he would be the 8th Minnesota scholarship player on the roster. So again, we all know how much the state produces talent, and there's been a lot of guys that have left that we say, hey, what if he was back? What would this team look like? And we can finally see that with Garcia and, 3 players that Ben Johnson signed in the high school recruiting class with Braden Carrington, Josh Ola Joseph, and Pharrell Payne. There's 3, really up. I think that these freshmen will be able to help the team right away.
Last thing for you, Marcus, and we've talked about this, just how much the portal hurt them last season. That's to be expected, I suppose, when a coach leaves and then you're kind of scrambling to fill out your roster. Seems like it's evening out a little bit this year, certainly with the Dawson Garcia news and maybe some more to come this week. In future years, do you envision Ben Johnson and this program being helped at least as much as they're hurt by the portal? I mean, he seems to have enough connections that he should be able to use this to his advantage to a certain degree.
It's hard to say. Every year, you're really going to be reshaping your roster. If you rely on the portal as much as teams do now, and you really have to, because you have to stay old. You have to stay mature and have experience. the minute you go young, that's when you're going to probably take a hit and have a dip in your success. It happened with Patino. He inherited a pretty experienced team from Tubby Smith that had gone to the tournament, and they won an NIT championship, And, then all of a sudden he lost Tubby Smith's recruits. And, it was before they had the one-time transfer rule. And then he had a bunch of freshmen and sophomores that were playing, and they won only 8 games. And then they turn around once those guys were experienced and they started winning again. Well, you're not going to see that. I mean, coaches cannot withstand those types of dips in success. And so you're going to look at him, especially during his first few years, attack the portal pretty consistently because he has ties to Minnesota players that he recruited when he was here and when he was at Xavier. And, there are going to be a lot of players even in the next couple of years that he didn't necessarily recruit too hard, but they want to come home and play at a high level. And so, he's talked to me about that, hey, in his first few years that I'm coaching, I'm going to have a lot of relationships with players, and then I'm going to have a lot of people wanting to come home. And that's what he's going to, rely on. Once the players like the high schooler class this year start to develop, and then they're older, then maybe you don't have to rely on the portal as much. But losing 10 players last year, I mean, that just put them way behind the 8 ball. And I'm shocked. I mean, Jeff Goodman, a really good college basketball insider out there, I think he posted recently that there were 11 programs in the country that had not lost any players into the portal as of now. And Minnesota was one of them. And that's 11 programs, and he's talking about high major in 68 programs. So I mean that's that's saying something.
Quite a difference a year makes. Well, good stuff, Marcus. Keep following his coverage. Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. I'm sure you will be on top of all the rest of the portal and recruiting news, but the big one this week, obviously, Dawson Garcia committing to the Gophers, making them better for next year and beyond. We'll catch up soon. Okay, Marcus?
All right, appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Good stuff from Marcus. As always, check Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Marcus has a good breakdown of the guards the Gophers are looking at, some of the other players they're looking at in the transfer portal, so we'll see how that all shakes out as the week goes on. But certainly looking for some additional help in the portal going forward. Speaking of additional help, the Wild won and got a little bit of help on Tuesday in their quest to gain home ice advantage in the West. They took care of business against Montreal 2-0. Kevin Fiala gets his 30th goal of the season. Going to be a tough decision in the offseason. Lavelli Neal III wrote about that today in the Star Tribune, whether the Wild keeps Fiala or keeps Matt Dumba, because one of those is probably going to have to go based on the salary cap, based on Parisi and Suter hitting the books in a hard way. So Fiala with his 30th goal certainly showing his worth to this team. Dumba's shown his worth to this team in many different ways too, though, so that could be a tough decision. But the here and now is the Wild has both of them, albeit Dumba's been injured lately. Fiala contributing to that 2-0 win vaults the Wild got 103 points now. St. Louis, which was ahead of them by a point going into Tuesday, lost in overtime to Boston, so they pick up a point, but just the 1 point. So now both teams have 103, and the Wild has a game in hand, has played one fewer game. The Blues only have 5 games left, while the Wild has 6. By the way, everybody at the top of the West has been on fire lately. Avalanche 9-1 in their last 10. Wild 7-1-2 in their last 10. Blues 9-0-1 in their last 10. Really showing themselves down the stretch to be awfully good teams. The Central Division is going to send a lot of good teams into the postseason, perhaps 5 of them. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But yeah, it's been pretty impressive to watch, and maybe the Wild can get home ice now. We'll watch that going down the stretch, but they've got some easier games coming up here. Montreal was a good one for them. Vancouver and Seattle are the next 2. So we'll see if they can kind of maybe bank some points, get a little cushion before they have to finish up later on this season with a couple tough ones to finish. They've got Colorado at the very end of the year, and they've got Calgary right before that. So the two division leaders are their final 2 games of the regular season. Let's finish with the cooler. Twins lost 4-3 at Kansas City, another game where the bullpen couldn't hold a lead, although a pretty big task. They were, up 2-1 after 4, 3-2 after 5. You're not going to win every game like that, but Tyler Duffey gives up home runs in the 6th inning, 2 solo home runs to make it 4-3. That ends up being the final. And again, can't treat every Twins game like the end of the world, but this bullpen is not good, and you can draw a straight line right now to the decision to trade Taylor Rogers basically on the eve of the season. I hate to tell you this, but Tyler Duffey has struggled, has a 9 ERA so far this year, has 2 losses, directly responsible for a couple of blown leads in the later innings. Taylor Rogers, traded to the Padres, has pitched 5 scoreless innings, 5 outings, 5 saves, 5 one-inning, no-run situations. He's only given up 1 hit and 1 walk all year in those 5 innings, struck out 5. So you do wonder at this point what the Twins' bullpen might look like with Taylor Rogers, what it would have looked like if they would have just left this alone instead of trading him for Chris Paddock. Maybe time will tell that was at least a neutral move or even a good move. I don't know. Right now, that does not look good. Right now, they sure could have used Taylor Rogers in that bullpen. And, I don't know if the record would be all that much better, but I bet they'd be at least a game better right now if they had not traded Taylor Rogers. So right now, Twins 4-7, really lacking in identity, unless that identity is can't hit and can't close out games in the bullpen. That will do it for me today. Plenty of good stuff coming up on Thursday's show. Trey Lance, former North Dakota State star from Marshall, number 3 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, will be on Thursday's show talking about the draft, talking about raising a bunch of money, talking about a bunch of other stuff in the NFL. So listen for that. We'll have plenty of other stuff on Thursday's show as well as we get ready for Game 3 between the Wolves and the Grizzlies. That will do it for me here today. Thanks for joining me. I'm Michael Rand, back at it again on Thursday.